buying a car in Roatan, Honduras, you really have three main options, which is buying on the island, buying on the mainland, or importing it yourself. I have done all three. And I wouldn't say one's right, one's wrong. It really depends on what you want and what you're looking for in a vehicle. The first option, the first one that I did, buying a car in Roatan. This is by far the easiest because the car is already there. You don't have to ship it. You don't have to worry about duties. You can actually inspect the car. You can do whatever you need. Now, the big downside on this is, cars maintain their value really well in Roatan. So that's great if you have a car and it can last forever, kind of. But cars are very expensive in Roatan just because it is such a pain to get them onto the island. The cars just maintain their value. So cars that would be almost salvage cars in the United States, they go for $3,500 to $5,000, which is just, it's a lot of money. So you are paying for that convenience of a car already being in Roatan. And something else that is, the benefit of buying in Roatan is the title. If you already have a license plate, it's already titled, meaning it's not going to randomly get impounded, because I don't know anyone that's gotten a car out of the impound once it goes into the impound because the fees are just too expensive, or the duties, or I don't know what happens. That's just where cars go, and I never see them come back out. So buying in Roatan obviously has those advantages. You are paying for that privilege, but you also get to see the car and you get to inspect it. You can usually drive it, and you can also send it to a mechanic. There are mechanics all over the island that are really, really good. So that it's the convenience that you are paying for. It's also the most expensive option. And keep in mind, cars in Roatan or on Roatan, they do not last as long as cars somewhere that's not super humid and salty. So things like to corrode, batteries corrode. You have to replace batteries more often underneath the car. Just the salt, the humidity, cars don't last as long as they would in a non-humid tropical environment. So that's something else to think about. Even though there is a really high price, you're probably going to have higher maintenance on the older cars, even though they're still going to hold their value really well. But by far the easiest option is just buying in Roatan and then going from there. So the second option is buying it from the mainland. So that I have done this as well. That's where I've gotten nicer vehicles from the mainland and just have it shipped over. It's fairly easy to ship from La Ceiba or Puerto Cortez. Really depends on where you're getting the car. Most of the cars are going to be in San Pedro or Tegus, and then you have someone drive it over. Now, the big issue here is, there's a couple, is you might not see the vehicle. So you either need to have a representative that you trust that can go to Tegus or wherever the car is located, or flights from Roatan to the mainland. You can take a ferry. You can take there's a couple airlines that fly a couple flights every day that are usually around $100 to $130. So you can go out and check out the car yourself. In case I don't personally have a mechanic on the mainland, so it doesn't do me a lot of good to go check out the car. I mean, I can see obvious things, but it is kind of nice having a mechanic you trust. I do have one in Roatan that buys cars on the mainland and brings them in. So that would be another option, just to make sure that you can check it out. Something else to watch for is the title and the VIN. Is it a salvage title? A lot of the cars that we get on the mainland of Honduras are salvage titles from the US. They're US cars. They come to Honduras and then they're refurbished, which, there's pros and cons to that. Doesn't mean it's a salvage car, no, but it's going to be darn near impossible to get any type of insurance on it. So that's something to think about. But I mean, as far as the car goes, it's probably a great car. But keep that in mind. It's not going to be Kelley Blue Book value. Doesn't really apply. I can give you a ballpark, or you can even do ballpark with any of the online companies, Kelley Blue Book, Carvana, any Vroom, any of those. They're going to give you ballparks, but keep in mind those are all United States based companies. So it doesn't always translate 100%. Something else you can do on the mainland is you can buy a brand new car. I know, I kind of jumped into the used car because it's much easier to get a used car. But actually, I do think Kia and maybe Nissan has little micro stores near the airport now, which would be nice if you want to buy a new vehicle. New vehicles are going to be a lot more expensive than the same car in the United States. I can't compare to other countries. I just know if I see a price tag on a Kia in the United States, it's one price, and then I see one in Honduras and I'm like, whoa, why is that like $7,000 more? So pros and cons, but also if you do get a brand new car, you do have financing options. It's one of the only places we have financing options, especially if you are not a Honduran citizen. Just like if you go to buy a house, there's really not any options unless you're a very well-off Honduran citizen that probably can just pay with cash. But if you're an immigrant or a foreigner like me, this is one of the only times we have a chance to finance, and you can finance through Kia or Nissan, are two great car manufacturers that are available on the island as well as mainland Honduras. With that, you do have to have car insurance. Car insurance is much, much cheaper down there because it's mostly just, it's much, much less. I don't want to get into all the liability differences, but you do have to insure the vehicle if you have a car note on it. So just things to think about, different options. Kia and Nissan are great because another thing that you need to think about with being on a little island is parts for material, like getting parts. It can be very, very challenging. I know in the United States, I drive a Land Rover and it is a raging pain in the butt to get things in. I once had to wait almost 6 months for a windshield, and that's in the United States. Imagine that in Roatan, where parts are just hard to come by. But if you do get that new car or a car bought on the island, do keep in mind the parts and how it can be serviced, because that can, make your life very, very uncomfortable when your car is broken and you can't get the parts. So that's kind of my next point on if you decide to import a vehicle, which I'm actually in the process of doing that. It is a Jeep, and it is an American-made Jeep. That's very, very important here because of CAFTA, the Central America Free Trade Agreement, meaning I do not have to pay duties, theoretically, or legally, maybe, anyway, on that vehicle, because it is made in North America, and I can bring it to Central America. And then also with my residency status, I'm a legal resident in Honduras, so I don't know if I get to bring one car or if my family gets to bring in a car. I'm not sure. I've never imported it before, so I'm only going to use this once in about 10 years. And I don't recall if it's once every 10 years or it's once per person, once per family. Anyhow, any of the import companies, the reputable ones, can tell you. I just know that I can, but I've only done it one time, so I'm not sure the max amount. But I'm bringing in a North America made vehicle, and so it applies for CAFTA. The residency, I don't think residency actually matters where the car is made, but for CAFTA, because otherwise you can be taxed up to 57% for duties, especially if the customs agent that's importing your car on the Honduran government side thinks it's a luxury vehicle, because that's when they have a lot more leeway, but the duties are between 33% and 57%. And so you do want to be very careful at what you get and make sure that you use a reputable import company. Anna Caribe has been great. There's also a wonderful company right next to Hyde, which is one of the shippers that I have shipped with for many, many years, and that's who I ran my wine room through, which that's how I can talk a lot about importing and luxury items and discretion of the agent, because you want to catch everybody on a good day and make sure everyone's in a good mood, and so you're not charged the maximum duties on anything. And that's why that CAFTA agreement, the Central America Free Trade Agreement, is so very important if you are importing. If you do import a car that's not made in North America, let's say it's made in South America, you do have other trade agreements. I'm just not as familiar with those. And that brings me to another point, which I'll get to in just a second, about parts and where items are manufactured. You're going to have different parts. But back to the import duties, you just want to make sure that the car is made in North America, just so you can reduce those duties. Now, if you import it from Europe or wherever else you're from, just keep in mind you could face a duty up to 57%, and it's at the sole discretion of that customs agent. And then that gets me to the next point. You need a good customs agent on your end that can give you quotes and just anticipated fees beforehand. If they will not do that, might be a little bit of a red flag. And there are very, very good customs agents that work for you. There are also ones that try really, really hard and just really screw up the entire process. And if something gets screwed up, it would take an act of God to fix it. I've had things screwed up. I had my first company, land purchase. None of it was done right. I don't think it was ever done right. I sold the property, but it ended up being a disaster because I could never get the stock. It was just, if it's not done right from the beginning, it's almost impossible. And you might end up with one of those cars that is in that impound that just never seems to get out, or it's so expensive to get it out. It's just like, screw it, leave it. So very, very important that you follow the rules. And the last thing that I will say about getting a car in Roatan is the parts. You want to make sure you get a car that you know you can get the parts for. Like, there is no way I would ever drive a Land Rover in Roatan, Honduras. It's already a pain to get parts in the United States. So Nissans are great, Kias are great, and that's because there are local dealerships in Roatan as well as all over Honduras. So it just means the parts are readily available. You can have them shipped usually within a day or two. Or if you do buy a car from the mainland, check to see where it's manufactured. Is it made in North America or South America? Because you're going to have different parts, and you're going to have, it's sometimes easier or harder to get parts. I just know North America Jeep parts are fairly simple because there's a lot of those cars on the island. So a lot of the mechanics do keep those parts. So Nissans those are good. They don't break very often. And then there you can get the parts pretty much anywhere, but that's just a few things to think about. It's not just the car purchase, the wear and tear, or the salvage title or not salvage title, to insure, not to insure. But if something breaks, you want to be able to fix it, and you don't want your car sitting in your driveway for 6 months waiting for, twiddling your thumbs and being like, crap, I need a part, or, oh shoot, I can only get this part from Argentina. How the heck am I going to do that? Versus I pick North American cars because usually people are coming and going a lot. Well, I'm just more connected to that zone, so I can usually order a part and have someone bring it down within a week or two for me. So thanks guys for tuning in. If you guys ever have any questions, my door is always open.